Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men. And what we try to do in this podcast is redeem men's conversations. And the guy that I have sitting across the table from me today could do this entire interview or this entire intro because he's typically the producer of this. This is James Rutledge, affectionately known as JR around here. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going? Nice to be on the other side.
It's good to have you over here. It's good to have you. Now, your replacement over there, Austin, he's a little subpar. We'll see how he does today.
He knows a thing or two. I trust him on it.
I've been messing with Austin Tucci since the moment I walked in here, and I'm enjoying it. So, well, as I said, we try to redeem men's conversations, talk about the right things in the right way. And this whole season is dedicated to men and marriage, and we're kind of covering a lot of different ground. You know, we've had young married man, we've had an older married man, and I did a little intro session on marriage, and I really wanted to have you on here today because I really do think a whole lot of people, men, will really be impacted by your story, and we'll kind of get to that here in a little bit. But why don't you just introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, where you grew up, that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. My name's James, and I'm 43, I guess, right now. Yeah. So it all
It takes
up.
me a minute sometimes.
I'm like, keep counting it down. From Lexington, grew up at Southland, kind of off and on. When I was a little kid, my parents went to a little more charismatic church. We were down in Alabama for a few years, but basically, short of it, born in Lexington, short stint in Alabama, came back, and then pretty much from like middle school on, grew up here at Southland.
What year did you graduate high school?
95, Taste Creek.
Yeah, see, I remember, you and I were in high school at the same time. You're a couple years older than me, and so I remember you even started kind of running sound and helping out a little bit when we were in high school, right?
Yeah, that was kind of how Brewster got me in. That's kind of how I got into church stuff. I was kind of in the alternative crowd in high school, didn't really enjoy, I enjoyed Wayne and stuff and the church services on the weekend, but I always thought that the youth group was kind of cliquey. But that was mainly because I just never gave it a chance. And Brewster kind of reined me in. He's like, hey, why don't you come in and do some technical stuff for me? I was like, oh, maybe I'll help with that. And that kind of got me hooked.
Well, dude, I remember one time, and I don't know if it was you or my friend James Dooley.
James Dooley, he's the one that got me.
Okay,
yeah,
so
he trained me.
So James was a friend of mine, and I remember the old barn where we would meet here on Southland's property, high school students. And for some reason, like, you and James both could not be there that Wednesday night. So Brewster was like, Scott, hey, Scott, and he's like, just sit back here and just hit this button and do this and do that. Like, man, Brewster, I don't want to do this. Like, so I sat back there, and I don't even remember who was doing what, but somebody caused some feedback. And like 200 students turned and looked at me as if I had done it. And I was like, man, I hate this job. This job sucks. I'm never doing this again. And I told Brewster, don't ever ask me to do it again. And that was when I first realized, like, you guys get a lot of eyeballs on you too,
You get some thick skin after a while, after enough people stare at you, stare you into a wall.
Yeah, if anything goes wrong, everybody's looking at you like, fix this, man.
Yeah, if it's great, nobody notices, which is kind of what you want. But if it's something messes up, everybody's like, what's going on?
So high school, Tates Creek High School here in town.
Yep.
What'd you do after that?
So I went to UK for a couple years, and I was going to UK doing a computer science major, and was still serving out here all the time. I was here anytime the doors were open. Loved serving with all the people here. Still did a lot of stuff with Brewster. I was back when Scott Ford first came on, so I did a bunch of stuff with Scott. I ended up with another guy named Randy Crawford taking on a 8th grade guys D group, and Derek Bro was in that group, so it's hilarious. So I'm like, I can always lord that over him. I'm like, I was your youth group leader for a while. But did that for a couple years. Kind of got a little disillusioned with the college thing. I think when I got into computer science, I was like, I want to go program video games. But at UK, it was all like theory and stuff. And I was like, this is kind of boring. So I ended up skip class a lot. I was like, I'll just do the homework. I can finish it all anyway, which that didn't really work out. But so I actually got on probation for a while at UK. And right about the same time, there was another guy here that had gone from full-time technical to part-time technical. His name's Clifton Grimm, and he hopped on to do, I think it was band directing at LCA. So there was a part-time position opened up, and I just jumped on that. I was like, well, crap.
What year was that?
That was 98.
Okay. I started in 98 part-time.
Yeah,
so I've
September
always
98.
felt like I knew you and I kind of tracked, along together. So when I came back a few years ago and you were still here, it was like, of course he is. We'll pick right back up.
Should have signed that 20-year contract. No, but yeah, me and Vandy, if anybody knows Mike Vandermark, he started like a couple months before me, so we're kind of the old guard around here. But so yeah, jumped in part-time, ended up doing everything part-time. We loved doing it, so we would work more than our hours anyway, and just be out here all the time. I think I ended up mixing like every weekend service from 97 to 2000. Like I never had a break because I loved it so much. And then Kenny, the guy who had taught me at the time, he was like, "Oh, this is great. I can sit in the back and do
smoke
other
a
stuff.
cigarette.
Smoke a fat one while he's out front. This kid's out front makes it for me." But anyway, I just loved it anyway. But it was one of those things. It was like if you can get paid to do what you love, it's not really work. So I had a great time. But so 2000 is when we came on full time. Me and Clifton both bumped back up to full time. So we were full time and been here ever since. So.
Well, in those years, we were doing Saturday night services.
Yeah, 2 Saturdays.
It was a lot, man.
Yeah.
It's your whole
We had like
weekend.
one day off. Took off Mondays. That was it.
My day off was Thursdays back then. What a fun day to have off. Nothing.
None of your friends, like your friends try to get you to do stuff, and you're like, "Oh, I'm working." And they're like,
that's right.
On the weekend.
Yeah. Like, hey, but what's going on Wednesday night? You got something Wednesday night?
Right. It kind of got bad because I had a lot of non-Christian friends from college and stuff, and I was like, man, I gotta still invest in these people, but I can't because I'm working at church. How backwards is that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm at church all the time.
Right.
Can't reach lost and broken people.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
well, so I left here in 2006, and so what year did you get married?
I got married in 2009. It was we met in 2008 here at Southland and dated for 5 months, engaged for 5 months. But so it was 2009. So you'd been gone for a few years.
You met Lauren here at Southland. Okay. In what context? So you walked out of the sound booth. You're like, I'm going to go talk to her. How'd that work?
I had a crush on her, I think, when I first got introduced to her. But she was on the vocal team.
Okay.
She had moved in from out of town. Her sister was on staff here at the time doing vocal stuff, Amanda, and her story was kind of a crazy story too. She had moved up here in 2007 to escape a really bad marriage that went south down there, and she ended up getting divorced from that. So she moved up here. She was actually born here, and then, or actually she might have been born in Louisiana, but she's from Louisiana. But she was born in Louisiana, moved up here as a kid, had a fair amount of her school years here as a kid, moved back to Louisiana. Okay. And she had gotten married in Louisiana while Amanda was still up here. But so she had basically come up here in 2007 just to start a new life, basically. Get away from this guy who she'd been with before. And I ran into her just through, me mixing and her singing. And she, the funny thing, she actually asked me out.
Really?
Because she's the total extreme opposite of me. She's the extreme extrovert, life of the party, the person in the room who's going to tell anybody anything.
Yeah.
She used to, heckle Weiss when he was doing stuff backstage. She'd be like, "I know you're the preacher, but you're going to need to rub my feet." Just giving her a hard time. But, so I met her here and just was fascinated by her. I was always kind of a romantic at heart, and I always thought, there's going to be some magical person that God's got for me somewhere or something. And I was 32 when I met her. So I'd gone a big chunk of my life without really any real relationship with anybody. And so it was kind of like a whirlwind all at once, but it was.
So she asked you out while you're serving together?
Yeah. I think it was like a Tuesday or something.
So she was
like,
turn up my mic, turn up my monitors, and
she
by
came
the
out
way,
to the
let's go out.
soundboard. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, by the way.
Very cool. Where'd you go for your first date?
First date was at Pacini's Pizza over on Boston Road, December 23rd. At 12, I was supposed to be there at 12:30, but I was late, so I got there at 12:40. Because anybody knows me, I'm always late. I'm like, eternal. That's my
How'd
biggest
that set
deal.
with her?
She was fine. She knew I was going to be late. So. She was on her lunch break. She was like,
But she had observed that before. So
she observed that before. We had a good time. I think I walked out of that date trying to name our kids. Yeah, I was like, she's the one. Yeah. Fell over hard. So. Ended up having that date, and I think the next date we had we had scheduled a date for Red Robin like a few days later, but then she called me Christmas Eve and she was like, "Hey, come over to my parents' house on Christmas Eve and meet the parents." I'm like, a little too soon for that.
Nice.
But I was like, I can't say no. So I went over there and met them. Had a great time. Really got to know them, which was really funny. But.
So you pretty much just started dating exclusively out of the gate?
Pretty out of the gate. Okay. For me, I'd never really dated anybody before, so it was kind of just, a wild ride. And she was so extroverted that it was just a lot of fun. But
So what'd you guys do? What'd you guys like to do together?
We did stuff. We like to watch a lot of. She was a lot of musical movies and stuff like that. We'd watch movies. It was kind of funny. One of the things I loved about her, she really loved to drive fast.
Really?
Which, for a guy, is like, oh, that's cool. Yeah. A girl likes to drive fast. She was, I had a motorcycle and she was into that. She's like, that's really cool. She had a sports car. She was like, oh, I want to ride in a sports car. But when we would drive around to places, if we were driving separate, she would race me everywhere. So, like, if we were coming back to church from dinner, we'd be both gunning it down US 68, trying to get there first.
Did you ever get a speeding ticket with
her? Sort of. This is great. She ran the block for me. I was coming down Brandon Road from church to go to her parents' house, or go to Amanda's house, actually. And we were racing each other down Brandon Road. This is probably incriminating. I was going a little fast.
What's the statute of limitations?
Statute of limitations.
It's a very narrow road for those of you all who don't live here. Yeah.
Going down that road, popped out on the kind of the main road there, and there was a police officer sitting there that saw me. And the funny thing, I didn't even know it, but it was a guy who's here on works with us, Chris Love, and he didn't know it was me. He just heard that there was this motorcycle speeding on the road, so he's like, I got him now. So as soon as I turned off onto the main road, I just gunned it because we were still racing. And she saw him flip his lights on and come after me. Well, she moved over into the lane and blocked him.
Blocked Chris Love.
Chris Love.
I like it. Yeah.
So I go along. I don't even know he's back there. I didn't see him. I pulled over into the neighborhood, and then he pulls up behind me. I'm like, oh, crap. It's like, I deserve this. So, he ended up coming up and seeing it was me. He's like, it's you. And he just like sucker punched me and walked away. And then as I'm sitting there, waiting for Chris to give me a ride act or something, she just cruises by real slow and just laughing. And I'm like, she's going to go tell her parents, and I'm going to get in all this trouble.
Oh, man, she's life of the party, man.
Yeah.
So you guys dated for how long did you say? 5 months?
5 months, yeah,
okay.
And then got engaged in May. Okay. I asked her dad. I was a traditionalist, so I had to ask her dad.
I did the same thing. It's nerve-wracking.
It's nerve-wracking. I was more nervous about that. I knew she'd say yes, but I was like, man, he's seen her go through all this stuff with the previous marriage, and I just thought about, and I want to honor him. I don't want to just be the next guy that walks in the room. It's like you were saying in your message a couple of weeks ago, or this past week, about, what would you do if your daughter, was going through all this trouble, and the guy comes in and says, hey, can I have a boat?
Right.
It's like, I don't want to just walk into this situation and be like, oh, can I marry your daughter?
Yeah.
So I took time to get to know him. We did a trip in March down to Louisiana there, went fishing with him, and just, honestly tried to get to know him and stuff like that. So
you get married. You get engaged in May. When did you get married?
I got married in October. So October 23rd.
Okay.
Yeah. So 5 months and 5 months. Didn't want to have a long engagement. First, was like, don't have a long engagement.
Yeah. So you get married. Weiss did the ceremony, right?
Yeah, John and Weiss both did it.
Yeah.
John Weiss. Brewster and John both did it. So it was Brewster did the first part, since he had known us for so long, and then John did all the formalities.
Very cool.
But,
and so what was your all's kind of plan for marriage? Did you guys have like a plan involved?
Yeah, we weren't. She's more of a planner than me. I was just kind of along for the ride a little bit. But, I think when we were talking, we both wanted kids. And when we talked about, well, how many kids do you want? And I said, well, I've got a brother, so I don't know, 2. That seems manageable. She goes, well, I want 4.
Yep.
She's like, I want to have 3 and want to adopt one.
Yep.
I was like, all right, we'll figure that out. Yep. So, we had thought, we both had a little bit of debt. And so we're like, well, let's pay all that off. And then we'll start looking at having kids maybe in 2 or 3 years once we can pay all that off. So that was kind of our plan.
Okay.
Let's just do that. So.
All right. So you get married. Weiss does the ceremony. I've always heard it was a really cool ceremony.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. It was a lot of fun.
Where'd y'all go on your honeymoon?
We got married out in Talon Winery, and it was just real special. It ended up raining cats and dogs. But.
Yeah, John said that he remembers his son Silas catching frogs at your wedding.
I've got a picture of Silas catching a frog. I'm like, this is great. But we ended up going on a honeymoon. We went to Vancouver, British Columbia, of all places, Whistler.
Oh,
because it was going to be right before the Olympics were out there, and we're like, oh, this would be kind of cool. One of her aunts and uncles had like a timeshare thing, and so they were like, hey, just pick a place. We can get into any of these places, so pick a place. So we're like, oh, this is a little off script, so let's try to do this. So we're up in the frozen north.
Yeah,
this one.
So you go up there for a week or so.
Yeah, a week.
And come back and kind of settle into life.
Yep.
Okay. So kind of take us from there and just kind of tell your story.
Yeah. So we were kind of settled back into life. We came back. I think we got back, for right around Halloween. So we had just bought a house together down in Nicholasville, which was awesome. And it was just like everything came together with that. So we're settling back into life, we're starting to do the married couple things. We're going to stuff, as a couple, we did a life group with other people at church as a couple, and kind of just get settled into that. She goes back to work. She was working, she was a loan officer at University of Kentucky Credit Union. So she was in the banking stuff, which was hilarious because I'm like, how do you have the patience for that? But so yeah, we just kind of settled back into life and doing that. And I think the 9th and 10th, we did like a staff retreat in Louisville where I was out of town. So I was over in Louisville.
That's fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Just
right
got
when you get
married.
back.
I got to go do an overnighter with all you
Right.
knuckleheads. Yeah.
We were texting each other like, I wish I was there. Yeah, I wish I was there, kind of thing. And then November 11th, which was the day after that, is kind of when everything kind of changed. So we got up 7:20 normal time. She got up and went to the bathroom to get ready and do all that. I was just kind of chilling back in the bedroom, and she came back to bed like really soon. I was like, that's kind of weird. She said, I feel funny. I'm like, what do you mean you feel funny? And she didn't really respond to that. I was kind of snoozing in and out or something. So she gets back up and goes back into the bathroom. And then I just hear her collapse in there. And, of course, you just go into shock mode, high alert mode. I went in there and she had busted her tooth because she had passed out and hit the ground. And so she was bleeding, but it was, that freaks you out because you're like, oh, blood was, from that. So, it was kind of a whirlwind morning. And I remember pretty much all of it because I was right there. But she ended up passing in. She was in and out of consciousness a few times. I called 911. Paramedics got there. And she was, she would stop breathing for a few minutes, or not for a few minutes. She would stop breathing for a few seconds. And then I was, I'm on with the operator and the paramedics are coming in the door trying to figure all that out. But yeah, I ended up, she ended up having a blood clot, but she was laying there, and I think she pretty much, her probably last memories were with me holding her there, waiting for the paramedic to come in. Paramedics had come in, and he was, I think, trying to just distract me a little bit, but he was trying to tell me what to do. And he said, some firemen and police officers are going to show up. You need to go outside and flag them down. But I think back there he was getting stuff situated or, figuring all that out. So
did you end up having to drive behind the ambulance?
Pretty much. So in true to form, when you're in shock, you don't really know what you're doing. So I think I was still like just wearing my underwear or something because I had just gotten up. He's like, well, I need you to put your clothes on.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're going to take her to, St. Joseph Jessamine, and you're going to, go into the ambulance thing and just say, hey, I'm here. My wife, they brought my wife in. So, so I remember doing that. I called her sister, and, what do you say? I said, hey, I had been texting her sister, and then I said, hey, she's not breathing. They're taking her to the hospital, and hung up with her, and then got in the car, drove. I remember driving, I was probably going, I don't know, 65, 70, and then but I remember even that moment was kind of weird. I just had this conversation with God. I said, hey, if it's your will, heal her, whatever, but I said, I just trust you with her. So if you need to take her, it sounds weird to even say that, but I remember in the moment just being very open-handed and saying, God, work in this, but I trust you with her. And I got there and went in the side door, and they were like, hey, we don't want you to sit out here with everybody else. We want to pull you in. It doesn't mean the worst, but we want you to have, sit over in this little side room. And in there for a while, and then Amanda got there, her sister, and shortly after the doctor came in, Dr. Cowan, and said, hey, we weren't able to get her to get her heart started again.
Yeah. And so for those who haven't been through something, that acute, I mean, what do you remember kind of your first response being?
And my first response was just, it was like your whole world just splits in half. It's like, this isn't real. This isn't, it's just shock. You're just like, what? I remember just grabbing Amanda. Yeah. And, I remember she said, I've got to call my dad. She said, are you sure? She's asking the doctor, are you sure? Are you sure? And he said, yeah. And I remember seeing different people as they had found out about it.
Yeah.
Because Southland we were actually having a staff meeting at that time. In fact, when I was on the way to the hospital, I called Aaron Ranson, who was my supervisor at the time. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be late.
Oh, gosh.
We're going to the hospital." I didn't know it was.
Yeah.
I didn't know how serious. I mean, I knew it was serious, but
Yeah.
so a lot of people from church were able to just come right over. So I started seeing people outside the door, and I've got just vivid images of people's faces, just worried and caring. And
just to give a picture, we're talking, what was it, 19 days?
19 days.
19 days from the day you got married.
Yeah, 19
to the
days.
day you lost her.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, having watched many people and been through, some circumstances of death, it's very odd because all of a sudden there starts to become all these procedural things you have to do.
Yeah, really.
So you're in shock and you're trying to grieve, and you're also trying to tell other people who then go into shock and are trying to grieve, and then also there's like all this procedural stuff you've got to do. So I'm sure that day and the days to come were just a total whirlwind.
Yeah,
for
it was
you.
a total whirlwind.
Yeah.
Even going back now on my phone, I've got pictures from back then, and the picture from the day before is her dancing in this children's number that she was going to do, and then the next picture is us trying to decide on the coffins.
Yeah, and you're like, so much happened between, but it's one day.
It's one day. It's all just bundled up.
So, you go through all of that. You got to get through a funeral and family and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then you go back to the house.
Yeah, right? I took a break from there for like 2 weeks, and then Jeff, Lobb, and Clifton kind of just took care of it. So they went over there and made it to where when I came back, it could be, because it was kind of a medical scene there. So Jeff ended up staying at my parents' house, for a few weeks after that, and Jeff came over I think the first few nights and he would just sleep on the couch with me, or with me in the room.
Yeah.
That was just so huge just to have somebody there. And I think he didn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Just his presence meant so much. It was like an anchor.
Sure.
The storms are just coming in, and you can't process everything, but just having a friend there that is just there was just huge.
So what was, beyond, all those things that I imagine were so incredibly painful, you're back in this house that you made these plans, you bought it together, you're 19 days in, you're in grief, and what kind of stage of grief did you find yourself in? At any point, did you get angry? What did that look like?
Yeah, I kind of went through all the stages. I had, my friend Clifton was a police officer, so he's used to dealing with people in those situations. So he's like, "Hey, here's this stages of grief thing. You're going to go through all these," and it very much made sense. I went through, denial and anger and one of the things that really just got me through that initial few weeks, other than friends being there, was we had a family friend that lived out in California, and when she heard about this, she said, "Oh, James has got to talk to Adam." And it was a friend of theirs who had almost the exact same experience.
Really?
He lost his wife 2 weeks after they were married from a blood clot.
Wow.
She got locked. She was in the bathroom. She passed out. She had locked the door in the bathroom. They couldn't get back in. They had to bust the door down. She was gone before they got in there. But I was able to call him and talk to him on the phone like 4 days afterwards.
How much time had gone by for him?
It had been 2 years.
So he had
it might have been 4 years, but he had some separation.
Time.
He had actually remarried by then. So, so just to talk to somebody who, this guy's gone through this. He's scarred, but he's alive. He's alive.
Yeah.
But he's, it's like,
it's possible.
Big fight. He's made it through.
Yeah.
It's possible. Okay.
Right.
If he can do it.
Wow.
Then God can get me there.
I did not know that part of the story.
Yeah. So that was huge.
Okay.
And, a few years later, I was able to actually do the same for another guy, and I just looked him up last night before I was recording this, and he's remarried, and he's got 2 kids, and so I was just like, that's awesome. He's great. He's doing well. So just to have God work in that way to recycle and redeem stuff, in the moment, you're like, this is terrible. You don't have words. This is terrible.
Sure.
This is why me? You kind of go through all the things, but you don't ever think it can come for good.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you going to redeem this?
Right. How are you going to redeem this?
Right.
Right.
So friends were a real anchor point for you
Yeah.
during that time, it sounds like. And I know many of the people you're talking about.
Yeah.
And You brought this book, The Grief Observed, with you for a reason. How did you said outside of, before we were recording? You said outside of the Bible, that book really helped you.
It really did. It was another friend of mine, Marty from church, who gave that to me, and I was always a huge fan of C.S. Lewis. Loved his stuff. Had never read this. Had never heard of this. It was kind of obscure, written by him. He wrote it with a pen name just because it was so personal for him. But it was his journal of after Joy, his wife, died from cancer. But this is so raw, and that's what I really needed, was to have somebody else who's in that, just venting and talking to God and just saying, hey, this sucks, this is terrible, I'm angry about this, and just to be able to some catharsis of having someone else that's in that situation.
And this was towards the end of C.S. Lewis's life. He got married much later in life. They were both older, and they had a pretty short run, a couple of years together, and he had already written like all of his great apologetic stuff, and then I think he had even written Problem of Pain prior to that, which was a great book, but it was all theoretical for him in many ways, and then it got real, and there was a season where he wasn't sure if his faith would withstand that, Yeah,
he had a quote in here, paraphrases it exactly, but he basically said, I never knew what my faith was until it got knocked down, and then I found out it was a house of cards. And I felt the same way. I'd grown up in the church, never really knew anything else. And it wasn't until this kind of ultimate test, if you want to call it that, was just like, oh gosh, I guess I actually do believe this. That's when it's really, when it meets the road. But, she had kind of been the prodigal daughter, from her life. She had gone off and chased, drugs, sex, not really so much drugs, but alcohol and stuff.
Yeah.
But, trying to fulfill herself with men and things and trying to prove her worth. Yeah. Both to her family and God. And she had come back full circle. And I learned so much from just hearing her journey through all that it really impacted me for the rest of my life to be able to have, coming from, I always kind of said, well, I wish I had a better story in terms of, but before all this happened, I was like, I
didn't
wish
have a dramatic
I didn't
story.
have a dramatic story. I was like, I never went off the deep end. I never, did anything bad or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the worst thing I ever did was bring a switchblade on the bus or something. Even then I felt bad about it. So I was always like, I was kind of the older brother in the prodigal son story, kind of a little entitled, a little resentful, I didn't have a story. But, getting to know her and seeing how rich her faith was through all that. And then having to go through this, and then having her, I've got her Bible here too, but having her Bible and being able to I kind of just switched over to use that just because she had all of her writings in it, and I was like, oh, this is just to see her insight on things, knowing her character and knowing what she had been through, but just to kind of take lessons from that. So.
When is there like I'm genuinely just asking, is there like a day where you look up and go, I think I've healed, I've recovered, or how does that work for you?
Yeah.
How many years separated are we now from the day?
So we're 2009, so
this is 21, so 12.
Yeah, so 12 years, yeah.
Okay.
It was probably like 10 years.
Yeah.
I think, grief is waves on an ocean, and over time it's always still there, but the waves get further apart and they're not as big.
I see.
So that, it's always there, but you remember less of the bad and remember more of the good. Getting to every time I've gotten to tell our story has been hugely healing, and over the years it's gone from more of a, where you couldn't get through it without crying to where now it's like more of a joyful thing. It's like, you get to share, what a rich blessing it was, even though it's a short amount of time. We were married for, just a couple of weeks, and we'd known each other for about a year, but it felt like we've known each other for a lot longer than that. We just kind of jumped right in, full, both with both feet. But to answer your question, just I think over time it just gets easier and easier, and there's not any one moment where you're like, I'm good. But
I don't know if I agree with the phrase "time heals all wounds," but time helps.
Time helps. Yeah,
time helps.
It does. It does.
Yeah. So we've talked about some people who were really good anchor points for you and great friends to you. I would also imagine maybe some people said some things along. You don't have to call them by name or anything.
Sure.
But
this guy,
people,
this girl.
Yeah, people tend to think they need to say something, and oftentimes will put their foot in their mouth. Did you experience much of that?
Yeah, and I kind of got a heads up from that, just from different people who'd been through different stuff. Even as soon as the funeral and the visitation, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have been at that end of the visitation line, having to take people.
Yes.
And, so much of the people, they're hurting. They don't know what to say. Just the fact that they're there is all that really matters. You're not going to remember all the things they say. They're not going to know what to say. Unless they really say something terrible. I think there was a few that were like, what in the world?
Right.
Which was kind of funny. But yeah, the one thing that always rubbed me the wrong way, and this is society thing. People always say this, but sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
And it's just
sounds like a Hallmark card.
Yeah, it sounds like a Hallmark card. Yeah. So I would always tell people, don't say that.
Yes.
But just be there. You don't have to say any one thing. Your presence is.
Let your words be few.
Yeah.
You really aren't going to say anything that's going to help necessarily, other than just your presence being there, saying I love you, something like that. But you can certainly say something that hurts.
Yeah.
It's a high risk proposition, and I think we feel a lot of pressure in that moment to be able to say something magical, and you just don't need to feel that pressure. Just be there for people.
Yeah, just be there. You don't need to have a magical thing. You're one of many, hopefully, who are going to come and console and be there. So they're going to remember your face in the line. They're going to remember you hugging them. They're going to remember you, being there. But
yeah, I mean, it's an odd thing to feel pressure over if you really objectively look at it, like as if you're somehow going to say the thing that will magically help shortcut the grief process, and somebody standing at the end of a casket is going to dry their eyes and go, "Y'all want to go eat?" I mean, it's not the way it works,
Yeah.
So just let this person go through the process.
Right, and it's just like anything else painful in life. It's going to be painful. It's what it is. Sometimes, it rains on the just and the unjust. So there's going to be stuff that you have to just go through. So
yeah. So as you are now 12 years down the road, you've referenced the man who kind of helped you remarried, and then a man that you helped has remarried. You have not remarried.
I haven't, and I'm totally open to that. But I think for a few years there was just for everybody's different, but for me it was just a need to recover more and heal more. And I think just time in general and being able to share a story has done that a lot for me. But there was a time fairly early on where, everybody grieves things differently, but I'm a high feeler, and I was grieving pretty openly, on Facebook and stuff, which is not always the best thing to do. But sure. I was grieving pretty openly. And like some of her family was not that way. There's, some of them were just more private, and it was a little bit. I think for me it was very healing to get all that out there, and for me it was like, blah, I feel this way. Okay, now I feel better because I've expressed it. I can go on about my day and stuff like this. And some of her family, like her sister, was like, grieving slower, which is totally fine. And she was like, sometimes I feel like she's my sister, but sometimes I feel like you hurt more for her than I do. Or like you're trying to make it seem that way.
Yeah.
And that took me back, and I thought, I'd actually need to be careful, of what, because, she was her sister for 28 years.
Right.
So, but going through all that, we kind of sat down and mediated some of the grief stuff. And Gary Black was there. He was a huge help to sit down, and we were all able to sit in a circle, me and my parents and her parents, and just kind of be able to just openly share where we were at, what we were going through. And we were done with that, and it was really good. And it was maybe just a few minutes after the meeting, we were all kind of getting ready to leave, and I just felt the Spirit was saying to me, this was about Lauren, for restoring her. Like it's about you, but it's not basically don't sit on a pity party. Like I was restoring her, and you got to be a part of that. So I was like, oh yeah, get to be a part of that. That's what I'm thankful for.
Yeah.
And so that
you got
was
to be
huge.
a part of her redemption story. Yeah. God
Part of her
used
redemption
you.
story.
It's amazing.
So that really helped me turn the corner in terms of just thinking about it so much and being like, oh, woe's me.
Yeah. So you sit in here and produce this podcast. We talk about marriage constantly, in here. And, you're 43 years old and single again. And we talk about marriage and we talk about kids and all that kind of thing. So give us some advice, those of us who are married dudes who have men like you in our circle. And what do we do poorly in regard to thinking of you,
right?
And then what could we do better?
Yeah, I think maybe poorly is not that you have to acknowledge it all the time, but just not acknowledging where they're at or what they're going through. It is hard because I've been there too. Once you're married, you tend to do stuff obviously with your spouse, which you should, and your family, and then you tend to bundle up with other married couples, and so it's easy for single people to fall through the cracks. And I don't think everybody needs to feel the responsibility for every other single person in their life, but God might put people in your heart. You can say, hey, maybe that person, maybe I need to be there for that person. And it's like what do what you want to do for everybody for one. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So if there's some people there that are in your life that you're close to, or maybe you walked through some of that with them, or you were friends with them when that happened, just when you can, invite them into your circle, invite them to your house, do stuff with them. I've got some really good friends that do that really well. Like Jonathan and Kirsten McCowan, they're always inviting me over to their house. Andy and Rachel Sloan, they're always inviting me over to their house, and Wes and Taylor and all that. They're a life group basically, but even though it's they're all married couples and I'm the only single one, but they've all done a really good job of just lifting me up. They were all praying for me today before this. Yeah. And just remember your single friends, your widowed friends, and as far as what to do with, each guy or girl that goes through this, depending on where they are in their life, they're going to know, or maybe not know, but they're going to, some people might say, oh, I don't ever want to get married again. That person was my person or whatever. And then I think probably for most of us who go through it at some point, they're going to say, this person was awesome. They were special. I would have been with them till the day I died too, had this not happened. But there might be somebody else that God has for you too. Right. So I would say just when you can, encourage them to, if they feel open to that, to be open to that.
Yeah.
Like I haven't dated anybody since then, but I'm open to it. But my friends are also very just encouraging. They don't. None of them would feel weird if you were to bring another person. Here's this new person. Oh, they're not your wife. You can't bring them.
I imagine at the same time it might be annoying if people were hypersensitive to your presence in the room too.
Right. You just want to be treated normal. Everybody just wants to be normal. Don't don't be weird. Don't. Yeah. That was something that was frustrating too sometimes, especially maybe not early on, because early on I probably did need it. Yeah. But 1, 2, 3 years afterwards, people would see you and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry," and you're like, "Dude, come on," Yeah.
I'm in a different place right now.
Right. You don't have to worry. I'm fine. I'm, just treat me normal. So
it's always good advice. Don't be weird.
Yeah, don't be weird. just don't be weird. That's going to get you a long way.
It's good advice. Well, man, I've seen you share your story before. I was in Colorado, and I distinctively remember a mutual friend of ours, Darren coming in my office with just tears in his eyes and telling me what had happened, and my heart just broke for you, because I knew he came back for the wedding.
Yeah, he came back for the wedding.
He'd come back for the wedding and was so excited for you guys and everything, and so I just couldn't wrap my mind and heart around it at the time. And then even when I, if you bring it up to John Weiss to this day, he'll get tears in his eyes because he goes, did their wedding on this day, and then we did her funeral not 19, but just a few days after that. And so it's in the life of our church, something that really stands out. And you, my friend, have stood out in so many ways. And I don't know how anybody could ever say a negative thing about you. You know, I know you got your own stuff and sin and struggles in your life, but man, you're a good man and you're an honorable man, and I'm thankful to call you friend and thankful that you were willing to share on this podcast. And so this will help more men than you know, and it may help some men in the future who don't know they're going to go through something like what you have gone through. Anything you would want to share before we're done?
I would share just to have that, lifeline of, if you know somebody who's going through this or you see somebody who's going through this, just reach out. They might not take you up on it. They might just want to be over in the corner, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But to do that and then to be there for people. And the other thing I would say, I've actually talked to a lot of guys who have been grieving divorce in similar ways. It's not, the person didn't die. It wasn't,
but the marriage is ended.
The marriage is ended. They're grieving things. They're grieving, a life that's not to be now. They're grieving this person they thought they were going to be with forever. The person they thought unconditionally loved them might not, And so I would say extend that same grace to guys who are going through that. I had, one of my closest friends who got me through a lot of this early on. He ended up getting divorced, Andy, and he actually came and lived at my house. I had the house that we bought. We were blessed to have a spare bedroom, and she always wanted to in the future to be a big entertainer and just bring people over, and we would bring over. I think we both planned to before we had kids, we'd bring people over to stay there who just needed a place of sanctuary, and I ended up there was a guy from Louisiana who needed to come, and so he stayed with me for a couple of weeks and just kind of recircled his life a little bit. And then Andy lived with me for a year after his divorce, just, coming back to center. And we were able to have long conversations at night just about shared similar experiences, not totally the same, but being able to grieve things and share what we'd learned. So, I'd say loss is loss, grief is grief, no matter where it is. So, recycle your pain.
Man, I'm thankful for what Jesus has done in your life and is still doing in your life. Yeah. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for listening to Locker Room. Please share this one with as many men as you know that it will help, and share it with as many men as you know, and it may help them in the future. And JR, thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Check you out next time. Bye.